eléctrica es luz, es movimiento, es comunicación, es salud, es desarrollo, es educación, es tecnología. La energía eléctrica se mueve desde la generación que viene del sol, el viento, la profundidad de la tierra, el agua y combustibles para llegar a los centros de consumo entre Arica y Chiloé. En el Coordinador Eléctrico Nacional, tenemos un equipo de profesionales que supervisan la operación del sistema, procurando que todo este movimiento se realice preservando la seguridad de suministro con la operación más económica posible y garantizando el acceso abierto a las redes. Bienvenidos a las actividades del Coordinador Eléctrico.
Bienvenidos al webinar Gestión de Riesgos y Cumplimiento en Ciberseguridad, Experiencia desde el Operador Eléctrico de California, donde podremos conocer lo que está haciendo el operador eléctrico en materia de ciberseguridad. En este webinar se realiza en el marco de la tercera Conferencia Internacional de Ciberseguridad, Infraestructura Crítica Eléctrica, que está siendo organizada por el Coordinador Eléctrico Nacional y Fortinet, con la colaboración de GIZ y el patrocinio del Ministerio de Energía, la Comisión Nacional de Energía, la Superintendencia de Electricidad y Combustibles, la Agencia Nacional de Ciberseguridad, el Centro de Innovación de la Universidad Católica Anacleto Angelini y la Facultad de Ingeniería y Ciencias de la Universidad Adolfo Ibáñez. La conferencia se realizará el próximo jueves 23 de octubre y tendremos destacados exponentes nacionales e internacionales. Más información del programa la entregaremos a través de nuestras redes sociales, pero desde ya los invitamos a seguir la transmisión en vivo ese día. Para comenzar este webinar, quiero dar la palabra a Carlos Finat, miembro del Consejo Directivo del Coordinador Eléctrico Nacional. Bienvenido, Carlos.
Muchas gracias, Andrés. Muy buenos días a todas y a todos. A nombre del Consejo del Coordinador Eléctrico Nacional, les doy una cordial bienvenida a este webinar titulado Gestión de Riesgos y Cumplimiento en Ciberseguridad, Experiencia de CAISO. Chile está viviendo un momento clave en materia de ciberseguridad y protección de datos. Con la Ley Marco de Ciberseguridad número 21.663 y la Ley 21.719 de Protección de Datos Personales, nuestro país avanza hacia un marco regulatorio sólido que refuerza las responsabilidades de los servicios esenciales y de los operadores de importancia vital en la protección de infraestructura crítica y de la información que éstas gestionan, lo que es tremendamente oportuno en el marco, ¿verdad?, de la acelerada transición energética que vive nuestro país, en la cual el número de empresas y la diversidad de empresas que se conectan al sistema eléctrico es creciente y muy superior a lo que era hace algunos años. Desde el año 2020, el coordinador ha venido monitoreando la implementación del estándar NERC-CIP en el sector eléctrico nacional, el mismo estándar que aplica el California ISO, marcando el camino de madurez progresiva en materia de gestión de riesgos y cumplimiento. Hoy tenemos el privilegio de contar con Hugo Frech, a quien aprovecho para agradecerle enormemente su generosidad de compartirnos su conocimiento y experiencia, Executive Director IT Infrastructure Architecture and Information Security del California ISO, quien compartirá con nosotros la valiosa experiencia de California en este ámbito. Su testimonio es especialmente relevante para el proceso que estamos impulsando en Chile. Le agradezco sinceramente a todos su presencia y participación. Es una instancia clave para fortalecer capacidades, compartir aprendizajes y avanzar juntos hacia una mayor ciberresiliencia del sistema nacional. La seguridad del sistema la construimos todos juntos. Muchas gracias y bueno, aprovechemos al máximo este webinar a continuación. No te escuchamos, Andrés.
Perdón, disculpa. Ahora quiero introducir a Patricio Leighton, director de la Unidad de Ciberseguridad e Infraestructura Crítica del Coordinador, quien moderará este encuentro con Hugo. Bienvenido, Patricio.
Buenos días, Andrés, gracias. Buenos días a todas y a todos. Qué gusto estar acá, presente en esta jornada, junto a Hugo Frech, un importante ejecutivo, ¿no es cierto?, de la CAISO, que nos va a dar a conocer su experiencia en el contexto de lo que va a ser la tercera Conferencia Internacional de Ciberseguridad e Infraestructura Crítica. Bueno, Hugo tiene una amplia experiencia. Él hoy es el Chief Information Security Officer y también es director ejecutivo, ¿no es cierto?, de infraestructura TI en el California Independent System Operator, más conocido como CAISO. Desde su cargo como CISO lidera la protección de la confidencialidad, integridad y disponibilidad de la información de la organización, gestionando riesgos, garantizando el cumplimiento normativo y fortaleciendo la resiliencia ante interrupciones que se puedan producir. También como director ejecutivo de infraestructura TI, supervisa las redes, sistemas y plataformas que sostienen las operaciones críticas de CAISO, asegurando su confiabilidad y capacidad para responder a las necesidades actuales y futuras del sistema eléctrico californiano. Cuenta con más de 30 años de experiencia en tecnología de la información, iniciando su carrera como aviador, oficial de sistemas de información en el Cuerpo de Marines de los Estados Unidos. Se unió a la CAISO en el 2003. Ha liderado diversas áreas tecnológicas desde entonces. Está certificado en el CISSP. Posee un certificado también avanzado en ciberseguridad de la Universidad de Stanford. Ya se graduó en el FBI Cyber Academy en Sacramento. Y también posee un bachelor, ¿no es cierto?, en filosofía en el Instituto, ¿no es cierto?, San Bernardino, y también un magíster en gestión de sistemas de telecomunicación de la Universidad de San Diego. Entonces, dejo con ustedes a Hugo. Hugo, gracias por estar acá y adelante con tu presentación y estaremos todos atentos para que posteriormente podamos hacerte algunas consultas.
Muy bien, thank you. Muchas gracias. Bueno, most of my briefing will be in English just because I've been schooled and grown up in the U.S. since the second grade, but I can understand Spanish and I can communicate in Spanish, just the technical piece. So I'll do this in English, but I'll welcome questions in Spanish and not a problem there. So as was discussed, my focus today is really talking about how we manage the cybersecurity risk and regulatory compliance in alignment with the NERC CIP standards at the California ISO. There we go. So the three areas that I'll talk about is one, the first area will be around CIP compliance and how we've integrated the CIP compliance program within the California ISO to ensure that we evolving standards and that when we have audits that obviously we're compliant with the audits, but also that from a security operations perspective, they work hand in hand. I'll talk a little bit about the cyber threat landscape, what are the threats that we're facing and how our strategy evolves based on those threats. And I'm sure that they'll be similar to what you're facing. So I think we have common points there. And then I'll talk about some of the things that we're doing internally just to prepare for an actual incident and how we're working with my teams on the IT infrastructure side and the information security side to make sure that we can respond should we have an incident in the future. So let's talk about, I apologize for that, get used to this. Okay, so in terms of the program, so within our organization, we have an overarching corporate compliance, and the corporate compliance team is responsible for the CIP standards, the operational standards, and also the tariffs. But that overarching corporate compliance team, the challenge that we had was that there was so much work on the critical infrastructure protection standards, the CIP standards, that we weren't able to successfully work across corporate compliance to get the level of detail that we needed. So what we did within the organization, within the information technology, which I am part of that division, we established our own sub information security compliance department. We have a manager and we have 4 compliance analysts that work closely with our IT system administration team, our information security team, our change management process, our configuration management, to ensure that we can provide the level of detail that's needed to make sure that we are, 1, following the standard, 2, that we're documenting the proper information that's needed to prove that we are following the standard. So we're trying to build around clear, measurable goals. And then the other advantage that we have out of having this mini compliance department within the division is it allows us to be more proactive. So that by working closely with our system administrators, our information security team, we really get to understand how it is that we operate. And then based on that operation, then we can develop better controls and control tests to make sure that we can implement those standards. One, to meet security. Two, to meet compliance on that. So, you know, one, there is this thing that says you can be compliant but not secure. And when I think about information security, I think of two things. I think of a coin where you have the information security operations, which is how we protect the organization. And on the other side, we have the compliance piece that says, if this is how you work, show me your procedures, show me your processes, show me your checklists, show me your audit evidence to make sure that what you say you do is clearly documented and followed. So that's why we want to make sure that we don't just treat compliance as a checklist box, because that doesn't guarantee the security of the organization. I think a holistic program really requires both sides of that coin, the operation side and the compliance side. And so, as I mentioned, we've embedded this compliance team within our daily operations, right? They meet regularly with our system administration teams, our information security department. So they're constantly meeting. So they're part of us. They understand how we work, and they become a partner to us to help us make sure that we're writing the procedures and following those procedures as designed to meet the SIP standards. We also are not just looking at numbers and SIP 1, or SIP 2 through 13, but we're actually trying to make sure that we talk about risk management in terms of what is the risk to your organization, and making or telling that story so that people are not just following the checklist or following a step, but they're actually owning that process to make sure that they comprehend the work that they're responsible for. So we're looking at it from a risk management lens. And the other discussion that we've had, and I presented to the board, is that cybersecurity is not outside of the business. It's part of the business. And that when you build your business, my goals here is for the business to operate first. So I want to make sure that, one, the business operates, and then I come in behind and make sure that my compliance and security operations enables the business to run. But they have to run together. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to protect the organization. So on that. In terms of what I call operationalizing the SIP controls, so we've formed a very tight integration with corporate compliance now. So now that we work directly a lot with corporate compliance, but we have our team that is day-to-day, but we meet weekly with corporate compliance to make sure that we're in alignment and working to the evolving standards, and that whatever we're working on, corporate compliance is aware of it, and that we're building those by design so that when we create a process or procedure, it includes all the required standards and auditable information so that we're not having to do this after the fact. The worst kind of control is one where you start implementing some work and then you come back and say, well, let me try to figure out how I apply the standard. You want to start with a standard and make sure that we design it with that intent in mind so that the information that the application produces has the audit evidence that's needed as part of the process versus an external process that you have to bolt on to the program. So what's the result of that for us? I think it enhances our ability to do audits because our audits now have the proper data, the proper information, the way it's presented, the way it's formulated. It's done at the beginning, so we're not trying to figure out how to do it after the fact. So our audits information, the audit evidence is much better than before. The other part is that because we have this tight integration and we have that team inside, our controls become stronger because now they're more reflective of how we operate. And by doing that, we reduce the risk exposure to an audit finding because, again, the controls and the processes and procedures are more in tune with how we operate. We've improved the workforce awareness. I think part of this involvement is that we don't want to treat the compliance team as a separate entity, and that they're responsible for the compliance piece, and the information operations and administration team does their own thing. Together, we build the awareness of the standards, and we work to ensure that we're in alignment with the standards together. So I make sure that the compliance team is a partner with our IT administration teams. And so there's information, sharing process and procedures to make sure that we're in alignment, and that the IT administrators are also aware of what they're required to do for the SIP standards. Again, by having the staff directly as part of the technology division, I think it gives us an opportunity to look at things earlier instead of waiting for a quarterly review by the corporate compliance. It allows us to see things quicker and sooner and respond to those based on changing conditions on that. So in terms of the framework that we use, so the benefit that we have is we have the NERC SIP standard. That starts us on a path to compliance. We also rely on industry benchmarks from other vendors to come in to help us to make sure that what we're building is in alignment, so that we have an external vendor come in to give us their point of view to make sure that we're not missing something that we're not seeing because we're so close to it. The other framework that I've implemented here is this NIST cybersecurity framework. And the reason I think makes sense to me and to the organization, because the framework speaks to the intent and the purpose, right? You have to identify what you want to protect it, detect it, respond, recover, and you wrap it around governance to make sure that what you say you do, you clearly document, and you have the proper controls to make sure that you're following what you say and what you did on that. It speaks in a language that most of us understand. It's not a MITRE framework. It's not some other framework that's very hard to understand. This is in English, or in Spanish, it's identificar, protectar, detect, respond, recover, and governance. It helps me tell the story. And if I can tell the story of why compliance is important, then people are more apt to help me with it and understand and be participating on that. A couple other things that we've done as we mature the program, because we've made changes over the last 3.5 years to the organization to help us make the program more robust and responsive. We created a manager. So we have a manager of information security compliance with a team. Now what we've done is we created a manager of information security operations. And that manager provides us the tactical execution of an incident response, the compliance monitoring, the daily security controls. And then, so the director that is responsible for information security has an ability now to be more strategic, right? That director of the network team and information security operations can focus on the strategy and direction. The manager, in turn, focuses on the tactical execution. He's close to the incident, he's close to the event, and so he can help drive that more clearly on the day-to-day operations. And that was something that we hadn't had for a while, and that was the other piece of the puzzle. I think that's the two sides of the coin. You have the manager of compliance, and then you have the manager of information security operations. And together, you have a whole program that addresses operations and addresses the audit NERC SIP requirements that we have to follow. The other, sorry, my mouse. We also established the Chief Information Security Officer role to make sure that we recognize the importance of the position and how we should manage the information security program as a whole. And so that was established this year when I was promoted to the Chief Information Security Officer role. The thing that we also did was we've also recognized that we needed to add staffing to actually be able to do the work that's required. So we were able to find 2 senior analysts that has a lot of experience within NERC-CIP. And I think that added an additional level of deep institutional knowledge, allows them, because they're so well versed in it, it helps them be more proactive in helping us to see things and go after things in the program. So we've grown the compliance department also by that. And as I said, the overall impact for us is we've improved the response time and clarity of responsibility. We have roles clearly defined and who's responsible for what. We've established strong leadership across both the strategic and operational side of the house. And again, establishing the CISO role is a clear industry standard accountability at the executive level, recognizing the importance of cybersecurity as part of the business. In terms of the integration that we do with our corporate compliance team, so as I mentioned, we have the corporate compliance is responsible for the tariff, SIP, and operational standards. And our information security compliance is focused on SIP for the critical infrastructure. So we established joint reviews of security controls, design, and execution with the corporate compliance team, because ultimately they are responsible for compliance across the entire organization. My team is responsible for the SIP portion of it. So this alignment, this is joint review, ensures that we're in alignment. We also use third parties to help us review our policies and procedures to make sure that we didn't miss something. And then allows us to make sure that we're in alignment with the proper preparations for an audit. And we've also tied our corporate compliance goals of audit in terms of findings and so on as a corporate goal, so that there are some specific compensation benefits if we meet our compliance by not having any SIP findings or operational findings or tariff findings across the organization. And that took a little bit of time to build this relationship, to reestablish that relationship that kind of broke down. The other part of this is you have to recognize that at the core of everything that we do is the people aspect of it. So you have to make sure that you establish that culture of being ready and also of secure, that they own that idea that they are a participant and a contributor to a secure program. So we continue to do security awareness training. We have monthly training for phishing. We have annual training. We have this is the third year where we have focused training on SIP for the entire division. So that's over almost 300 people as part of that non-technical training. We've also made sure that my vice president and chief information technology officer is part of that, so that he can emphasize in ownership and preparedness for that. As I mentioned, we have the monthly phishing awareness training where we constantly send out phishing emails to test our staff. And if you're a new employee, what we do is we test them more often just to get them up to speed to the level that we want to be sooner than later on that. And part of that monthly phishing training is if for some reason you're caught by that training, the phishing awareness training program, then monthly we have a kind of a 1 hour review of phishing do's and don'ts, what to look for and so on as part of that ongoing training for the organization. We also perform a monthly cybersecurity briefing to our chief operation officer. And what we do in that briefing is I have my teams present the compliance updates. I might present the security posture metrics. We talk about phishing trends. We talk about areas of risk for the organization. And we bring focus to where our program should go and where are the gaps and what are the next steps as part of that. And we do this as a monthly briefing on this. We combine that. We also do, and put to the slide, we also have a monthly security and SIP meeting between us and corporate compliance and the rest of the managers across the organization. So that ensures that we also are maintaining that relationship and awareness between our information security compliance team, and the corporate compliance team on that. So that's the other monthly meeting that we have on that. In terms of what are the controls to ensure that we have audit readiness and vendor risk management and collaboration. So one of the benefits of having that compliance team embedded within our technology division is that the controls that we're putting in place and the control test are more, how do I say this? They're more detailed and relevant to how we operate. So you may have a control. Then how do you know if that control is working as designed, right? Is that a detective control? Is it a preventative control? So we also, besides that control that we create based on the SIP standards, we also create a control test to make sure that those controls that we put in place are operating the way they should. I think that helps us from an audit perspective and transparency, because we can use that as evidence to the auditors that here's the control and here's how we test it to make sure it's functioning as designed on that. It allows us to more rapidly see if a control has failed, so that the duration between what we call the extent of condition, where something is not working as designed, we can hopefully reduce that by having those controls proactively notify us that that if we made a change to a system, that we didn't break a control, a security control or a compliance control. And so that's part of the control test on that. So this year, I think we have 193 controls, and I think we created 83 new control tests. I can't remember the number, but it's that number. We also do a monthly vulnerability assessment. So we're constantly scanning all of our SIP systems. Actually, all of our systems. We have a tool, Qualys, that we use that scans all our systems. And that tool comes back with a security score based on the number of vulnerabilities that system may be exposed to, that device, application, whatever the case may be. And we do, through that month, through this assessment, then we can decide what we want to prioritize first, and what things, if we can't apply the vulnerability controls, mitigations, then we have to make sure that we have identified what are those risks, how they're mitigated, and what are the compensating controls. And so every month I sit down with the information security operations team, and they provide to me a list of all the vulnerabilities that have come in for the month. Out of all the vulnerabilities that came in, how many were addressed through the patching cycle, and the ones that were not able to be patched due to operational conditions, application dependencies, and so on. We track each of those vulnerabilities, and then we identify for each vulnerability what are the mitigations to protect the organization, because we can't apply the vulnerability patching that's needed for that vulnerability on that. So we may have say 50 vulnerabilities that come into the system, and we may patch 25 of them. Well, the remaining 25, for example, and I think the number is lower than that, but that remaining number, we assign a specific tracking ID. What are the different controls that we have in place to mitigate that vulnerability until we can patch it on that? And that's part of our audit, that we track that requirement to patch your systems within 35 days. That becomes the evidence to say, here's all the patches we applied within 35 days. Here are the ones that we couldn't apply, and here's the mitigations for those as part of that. And we do a monthly review of those. I sit down with them and I review each one of those with my operations team. And I also have, in those meetings, I have the application owners also, so that they can hear what those vulnerabilities are and help them understand the need for them to make sure that they can update their systems, hardware, software, to do that. We've also instituted an end-of-life technology retirement program, right? Because for a long time, we delayed refreshes in terms of cost savings and so on. So what we've done is for the last 3 years, we've had an end-of-life technology program. We've identified systems to upgrade or replace as part of that, to reduce the number of remaining vulnerabilities across those systems. So we've seen a a downward shift in the total vulnerabilities that we had before because we had so many systems that were exposed from that perspective, to now, as we've updated our systems, the vulnerability trend has gone down, much smaller and more manageable now on that. We also perform authenticity checks on all our vendor supplied software and patches to make sure that supply chain attack. And then also we participate with other vendors that come in and do an assessment of our cybersecurity risk program and provide us their benchmarks and diagnostics of areas that we need to look at also on top of what we do. So the other part of this is that we continue to have collaboration across state, local, and federal agencies. We do joint training exercises. The greatest is an example of that. We do other exercises with the 9 independent system operators across the United States and Canada. We twice a year, we all send out the same phishing email, for example, just to get a gauge of how we're doing across the different ISOs across the US, just to kind of get a feel for the click rate, how many catches and so on that's going on that. We have information sharing protocols, and then we also do threat intelligence exchanges with the FBI and other agencies that's required through that process. So let's talk about the threat landscape, and I think this will be very common to a lot of the organizations. One of the things that I look at from a threat landscape is at the end of the day, it's kind of, the analogy that I use is it's like riding a motorcycle. It's not if you're going to fall, it's when you're going to fall. And what are you going to do to minimize the impact to yourself when you're on that motorcycle? So one option is I can get on a motorcycle, I can wear a t-shirt, shorts, and sandals, and off I go, right? But if I fall, the risk of me being injured rises because I'm not putting any protective controls. So what I do is I try to minimize that impact. So I wear a helmet, I wear a leather outfit, I have Kevlar spine protectors, elbow protectors, whatever you call it, all those things, so that when I fall, I can minimize the time to respond and recover. And so one of the things that I work closely with my team is this need to understand that we can't plan for no incidents. We have to plan for some kind of an incident. And how do we do that? Here are some of the common major threat vectors that we see. We have nation-state criminal threat actors. Grid transformation risk is one that we're worried about. And that is around, as we move to distributed energy resources, renewable energy resources, inverter-based resources, some of that technology, right, may have embedded code in it. And how do we respond should those be compromised? So we're looking at how the supply chain is impacted by all these inverter-based resources, foreign-owned hardware and equipment that may come in on that. Cloud security is another one that we're looking at, and our move into the cloud is in a very proactive state in the way that we move in. We're not moving in all at once. We're moving in sections as we see where that need is, and we're moving slowly on that because we know that cloud security, a lot of it happens through misconfiguration, not having the proper controls and checks in there, and before you know it, you're exposing data via the cloud. As I talked about supply chain security, we've implemented supply chain security controls where we're requiring our vendors to notify us if they have data breaches so that they can notify us. And we ask them to keep us informed of any changes and ask them to make sure that the software and hardware that they're providing for us is secure from the very beginning. We know that this workforce gaps is also concerned, right? Not having the right people, not enough people on that. And then we're seeing AI is out there also, that AI can be used for good, AI can be used for bad. So we're looking at that. And wherever possible, if a security vendor has modules with AI embedded in them, we're making sure that they're protecting our data, but also helping us protect our data at the same time. In terms of how do we address some of these is we've chosen, because you can't patch everything, right? You patch everything, you break everything. right? Because not everything's going to be patchable right away. So we've gone through a defense in depth architecture strategy. We try to extend our SIP controls, not just to SIP assets, but non-SIP assets. We want to embed the same behaviors that we do to protect those critical infrastructure to the rest of the organization, the enterprise, the corporate services that we have that we provide for the organization, making sure, because that's another vector or avenue of attack is through the non-SIP other. And as we talked about cloud risk mitigation, we're slowly going into that very carefully. We're not going to just jump in at once on that. We're also challenging our vendors, right? We're asking our vendors to help us be more secure. And also we're trying to find opportunities for workforce development. We have a program where we bring in interns, and some of those interns end up becoming long-term employees. And so we're trying to build our workforce program. We work closely with the local colleges and universities to we go to the job fairs for the colleges and universities to try to find folks there as part of our workforce development on that. So here's the kind of defense in depth. We know that no single point of failure, we're trying to ensure that no single point of failure will compromise grid reliability, that we have multiple layers of protection so that if one layer fails, the second one will catch it or the third one on that. We have one thing we had to do is buy new appliances, new firewalls, new SIMs, SOARs to protect the organization. And those appliances are at the network edge. So it's analogous to, I live in a home, I lock my front door and I lock my windows, but that means that someone still can come to my door and start knocking or checking that. So now what I'm doing is buying appliances that are at the edge of the network. It's like a gate. I put a gate further out so that hopefully that gate stops most of the traffic and a lot less traffic gets into our organization that it gives us time to respond. So we've purchased appliances that work at the edge to make sure that they're doing their analysis and protection at the edge before they get close into the organization. We've also had to buy purpose-built tools, right? We use some tools for our SIM and our SOAR, because we know that as technology changes, we also have to have tools that can adapt to the new technology. Some of our older technology, the legacy technology, did not have the capability to detect some of those attempts, those intrusions. So we're buying purposely built tools to handle those sophisticated threats. We control access to interfacing systems. It's tightly controlled, and it's restricted to what they can access and what they can see, who has access, and what level of access based on roles. We also use multi-factor authentication as a secondary control. And then also we have encryption both at the organization level and at participant data. So all our data is encrypted, whether it's in-house or whether it's out at the participant. In addition, we also, internally within the organization, we block any software that is not in our allow list. So we create a list of what is authorized to run. If you try to download an application or something to your system, it'll block it because it's not in the approved list. And you get a notification, we'll get an alert, and we'll go after it from that perspective. We're continuously monitoring our systems so that if there's a change to those critical cyber assets, we get notified of those changes. And again, we're relying on our change management process to ensure that people follow that change management process so that those changes are authorized. But if we encounter someone that made a change without a change process, our tool will capture that and notify us of that. And that, in turn, becomes a possible audit finding because, again, no changes should be made without no unauthorized changes are allowed under the SIP standards. As I mentioned, we do continuous vulnerability scans to identify and remediate any weaknesses that we have in our organization, our systems. And that's an ongoing, I have a dashboard that tells me the average from a security health perspective, I guess, for the SIP assets. And I have a score of for the non-SIP assets also. So I kind of get a feel for where are we from a level of risk, high, low, medium, and what are those assets that are maybe higher than we expected to be on that. We have email filtering, spam, and rules. We have URL protections where if you click on a link, it puts in a sandbox outside of our network, checks and inspects it, and then allows it to follow a link after it's been inspected for that. We also have host-based controls on our workstations and servers for endpoint detection. We monitor those for any changes or any intrusions of any kind. For isolation, we run antivirus. And as I mentioned, we do vulnerability patching as soon as we can based on the risk score of that patch. We, as an organization, perform monthly incident response drills. And the way we do our incident response drills is we use, I think I want to speed up here. We work with our business continuity team to make sure that we work across the organization, because we know that any incident is going to probably require executive review and involvement on that. And the purpose of those is to test our response to those threat scenarios, sharpen our processes, and make sure that our teams can work under pressure for the organization. As I mentioned, we participated in grid security exercises led by NERC, and we're involved in that planning as reliability coordinator function that we have here at the ISO. I've talked a little about this. We do information sharing and threat intelligence. We know that sharing information is a force multiplier for us. We maintain partnerships. We receive threat intel. And also we have briefings from the Electronic Information Sharing and Analysis, EISAC, and law enforcement partners and other quick instructions. And those work in conjunction with our business continuity program, our physical security. All three of us as together work together to make sure that we absorb the information for the organization. Oops. Again, we know that cloud-based technologies are also for that, so we're watching those carefully on that. The most recent report identifies the dependency on cloud environments, vendor lock-in, and risk of data breaches or code vulnerabilities in third-party systems, right? As areas of top areas of concern for us, and I think that the same challenges that you are also seeing on that. And again, as you distribute workload, those systems also have to be secure. You have to know where the data is being stored. Is it being stored outside of the country? Who has access to that data, and processes that may run inside or outside of the country on that. We're working closely with some of the cloud vendors to establish industry initiatives around cloud and SIP. Excuse me. We're working with Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and then wherever possible, we're trying to use AI both as a tool to defend and protect, and also to automate tools as possible on that. We don't want to over rely on these tools. We want to make sure that we understand how these tools operate, so that this black box decision making will not work for us. So we need to understand, and it has to be repeatable on that. And it has to be explainable, right? You have to be able to explain how you protect the organization via the use of these tools on that. So let's talk a little bit about the cyber attack simulations and preparedness that we have to follow. And this goes back to the thing about, it's not if, it's when something's going to happen. How do we respond on that? So the key program is really around how do you detect, respond, and recover, and ensure that people are ready to respond. So we know that technology can't solve everything for us, no matter how advanced our tools are. So we can't guarantee 100% on that. So part of the program has to be, how do you not just prevent it, but how you respond with some clarity and speed and clear coordination when an incident occurs. So we've instituted these monthly mini drills that we do with my IT information security department, the IT administrators, the change folks all the different administrators work together and they're involved in these mini drills, because what I'm trying to do is build muscle memory, right? So that when an event happens, I'm not having to ask people, go here, go there. I want to say, event happens in critical hours, people are doing what they're supposed to be doing for that first hour. So we have structured simulations across all the teams. We use the business continuity team to help drive these for us and the incident command process to do that. And so the idea is to test a small portion of it, right? It doesn't have to be the whole thing. That's why we do these small monthly 1 hour, 1 hour and a half drills. And it's really coordination across technical and non-technical units. It's how do we communicate, timely information, and the execution discipline, right? So then when something happens, you say go, they move. And then in that first hour, 2 hours, people are doing what's supposed to be doing. And then you can jump in and start adapting to the incident as required on that. So the first critical hours, as talked about, we want to make sure each one knows what role they play, what actions they must take, and how to escalate and communicate effectively on that. That's part of that muscle memory. And we're doing it on a regular basis because we're always going to have 0-day events now. We see those all the time. And so the 0-day events allow us an opportunity to apply these measures, know when to escalate, and avoid any data compromises on that. So you're going to see these. So I think these real world events become those tests that you can use to apply this response to an incident on that. In terms of EISAC coordination and cross-sector, we have the GridX, for example. We talk about EISAC as information sharing. EISAC is electronic information. ISAC is multi-state. Talks about links to state, local, and tribal information also. EISAC is more to our electric industry. They also provide services by 24/7, secure operations center monitoring, and threat intelligence. They can assist you in that sense. If you don't have the facilities, they can assist with some of that. We have our own SOC also that provides the 24/7. They also produce advisories, alerts, and notifications. They produce monthly, weekly intelligence reports, and they have a secure collaboration portal that we can pull information from as needed on that. The last piece here is really around alignment of the IT infrastructure and architecture with the cybersecurity program. I am responsible for both the IT infrastructure, all the data networks, hardware, software, Linux, Windows, corporate architecture, all of that piece, and then also security. So I want to make sure that when we build something, architecture is involved so that we build it with security in mind from the ground up and not try to do it after the fact. So our IT infrastructure teams ensure the foundational systems support rapid patching. We have network segmentation, we have logging, all of that in place to support security. To power our incident response so that we can respond in a way that we're not having to wait for someone to give instructions. They can do those instructions on their own. That the enterprise architecture team builds systems from the ground up, secure by design, with audit functionality built into it, so you have good evidence as part of that program on that. And then helps to, it does both. It helps improve prevention and recovery efforts, because if we have all these things in place, we can leverage these capabilities when an incident does occur on that. So in closing, simulations and preparedness initiatives help mature the organization, being integrated and establishing a proactive security culture, making sure that security is not just in the SIP area, but it spans the entire operations, right? The enterprise IT, the compliance piece, the corporate applications. Having exercises and having those strategic partners and strong architectural design underpinnings are designed to build resilience and protect both our mission and the grid, the broader grid community on that. And we know that threats are real, right? Our systems are complex. They're going to be complicated. And so if we can embed compliance into the technology operations from the get-go, making sure that we apply those same protections, not just within the SIP, but across the entire enterprise, and preparing your people to respond, I think we've built a model that's resilient and responsive to an incident, and hopefully will minimize the impact should we have an incident. Thank you again for the opportunity to share for my presentation. are there any questions? And I'll stop sharing to go back to the tool.
Many thanks, Hugo. Interesting presentation and your experience and vision from CAISO. Now I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I'll ask them in Spanish. Are you okay with that?
Sí, está bien.
Ok, Hugo, mira, vamos por el tiempo, a ver si alcanzamos a responder algunas preguntas. Para comenzar, muchas organizaciones abordan el cumplimiento de NERSIP en Latinoamérica. Han ido avanzando después de Norteamérica en la aplicación de este estándar. ¿Ya? Un simple checklist probablemente es suficiente para aprobar auditorías. En tu experiencia, ¿cuáles han sido los factores clave que les han permitido evolucionar hacia un modelo donde el cumplimiento esté realmente integrado en la operación diaria y que en el fondo la cultura organizacional, como tú comentabas, de la CAISO ya lo incorporó? ¿Cuáles han sido los factores clave que han permitido justamente internalizar el cumplimiento en NERSIP en la operación?
La verdad es que hace como 4 o 5 años, cuando yo tomé la responsabilidad, tuvimos una área y no nos fue muy bien. La verdad, no nos fue muy bien. Y a ese punto la decisión era que algo no está funcionando porque tenemos un grupo corporativo que es responsable por the audit, pero no estábamos integrados bien. Así que ese es cuando tomamos la decisión que tenemos que tener un departamento de personas con especialidad en NERSIP adentro de la división de tecnología. Porque muchos de los standards son basados a través de la network, user access, application vulnerabilities, and that level of knowledge is not easily maintained at the corporate level. So by having a small compliance team within, ellos trabajaban juntos with the IT administrators, and so they really understand and they're a partner with us versus being seen as an external corporate entity coming to audit us. So they help us from the ground up. When we roll out new applications, new infrastructure, new hardware, they're there with us saying, this SIP standard applies to this thing. Let's build the documentation together and then present it to corporate compliance. And now corporate compliance is reviewing it and making sure that we're in alignment. But the core of that tactical knowledge is in the technology division. And so they're in the day-to-day operations, they see the changes, they see the environment, and they can be a partner to help us in that. So having them internal to our technology division has been very helpful for us. Esa es la respuesta.
Ok, Hugo, muy claro. Respecto de, you talk about the simulation and incident response. Sabemos que CAISO realiza ejercicios en forma continua, ya, de respuesta a incidentes, y trabaja con GridX y con EISAC, ya, y son organizaciones que lo hacen en forma periódica y continua. Desde tu perspectiva, ¿cuáles han sido los aprendizajes más valiosos de esta experiencia y cómo han fortalecido por decirlo así, de organizational memory, ¿ya?, para responder de manera efectiva ante incidentes reales?
Sí, I think the smaller monthly drills that we do with our IT administrators and our security personnel, and incorporating those drills into the broader business continuity program. So we have a business continuity program that's responsible for the running the business if an incident occurs. And part of that involves working with the incident command system that says, if we have a cyber incident, it's going to be at the level of executive importance. And so part of it is the communication and coordination. And in those first few hours, if we don't respond quickly enough and communicate clearly enough, both internally to our operations teams and to our executive teams, is where we have an opportunity for things to go in the wrong direction. And so by having these regular, smaller, where people get to practice the communication, the coordination, who does what, when, what does the Unix administrator do? What does the Windows administrator do? What does the DBA do? What does the storage administrator do? All right. What does the security analyst do? In those incidents, I become an operations chief, and I'm responsible for the entire operations of the organization. So my role moves to a different level. My staff has to start working quickly in those first hours to provide me information that I can communicate to the executive levels. So it's really around knowing what to do in that first 2 hours, clearly communicating that, and people reacting based on what they know right away versus having to wait for someone to tell them. And that's the benefit of doing those, because we're going to have those. We just had the Oracle 0 day, right? And we had to respond to the Oracle patching. We got the teams together. We did the analysis. The Unix administration DBA teams went off to do their thing for the first hour, started doing their things. Security started doing their scans. We met on a regular cycle, and over the last 2 days, we patched our systems to make sure that we eliminate that threat. And you're going to have that now. Every time there's software 0 days now are more common because legacy software is going to be in-house on that.
Okay, Hugo, thank you. And finally, about the CECIR for power industry and collaboration. Thinking about the Latin America operator, what recommendation do you offer to the enhance cross-sector collaboration and improve preparedness against advanced threat? What's your vision about the benefits of the EISAC organization or CECIR organization for Latin American operator?
Un segundito. El beneficio, it's really that it gives you a broader perspective and view of the entire, like this allows us working through EISAC to see the entire United States as a whole, right? Because they're taking information from all the different states and regions and trying to provide that information to us so that it allows us to have that context and perspective so that we know how we're going to respond based off of that. And also, if you don't have, sometimes they can provide the capabilities for you to help you with some of the additional threat intelligence tools that you may need. And so that is also another opportunity for them to provide that service to you also.
Okay, Hugo, thank you so much for your presentation, for your collaboration with that. Okay. Andrés.
Bueno, muchas gracias.
Gracias, Hugo. Gracias, Patricio. También gracias a todos los que se han conectado hoy día a ver este webinar. Este webinar va a quedar disponible de inmediato en nuestro canal de YouTube para poder difundirlo y los que no alcanzaron a verlo completo puedan tomar desde el inicio. También los invitamos a todos a participar en la tercera Conferencia Internacional de Ciberseguridad e Infraestructura Crítica Eléctrica que realizaremos el próximo 23 de octubre, ¿verdad? Con destacados expositores nacionales e internacionales también. Así que a todos muchas gracias por participar, especialmente a ti, Hugo, también porque estás con cambio de hora muy temprano donde tú estás. Así que gracias por madrugar por nosotros y por contarnos la experiencia que tienen ustedes en Estados Unidos, digamos, respecto a estos temas.
Muchas gracias. Ha sido un gran gusto poder participar y cualquier cosa que pueda yo ayudar, aquí estoy para servirles. Muchas gracias.
Y bueno, a todos muchas gracias Patricio, también gracias a Carlos que estuvo con nosotros en el inicio y los esperamos en otras actividades del Coordinador Eléctrico Nacional y especialmente en la tercera Conferencia Internacional de Ciberseguridad y Infraestructura Crítica Eléctrica. Muchas gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias.